Colorado Territory, 1871. Wind howled across the plains like a wounded animal, carrying the promise of winter's first snow. 22-year-old Josephine Valenti stood on her porch, surveying the small homestead she'd maintained alone since her husband's death 3 years prior. Her chestnut hair, pulled back in a practical braid, whipped against her face as she drew her woolen shawl tighter. The ranch was hers now. 20 acres, 3 horses, 12 cattle, and a lifetime of memories both sweet and bitter. "No man will ever make me vulnerable again," she whispered to the wind, a mantra repeated countless times since burying Thomas after a Cheyenne raid. She'd learned that love on the frontier was a luxury that ended in heartbreak. Better to be alone, self-sufficient, than to watch another husband carried to an early grave. The distant sound of hoofbeats broke her solitude. Josephine squinted toward the horizon, one hand instinctively reaching for the Winchester she kept by the door. Riders meant trouble more often than not in this remote stretch of Colorado, especially for a woman alone. A single horse appeared, moving erratically. Its rider slumped forward, barely clinging to the saddle. As the horse drew closer, Josephine saw the dark stain spreading across the man's side. Blood. Her practical nature overrode caution. Whatever this stranger had done or whoever he was running from didn't matter. He was dying in her front yard. Josephine set the rifle aside and rushed toward the horse just as the rider tumbled from the saddle. "Mister? Can you hear me?" She knelt beside him, turning him gently. Despite the dirt and blood caking his face, she could see he was young, no more than 25, with sandy blonde hair and strong features not yet hardened by the frontier's cruelty. His eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing irises the color of summer sky before consciousness slipped away again. "Damnation," Josephine muttered, wrestling with her conscience. Taking in a wounded stranger invited danger, but leaving him to die went against everything she believed. "God help me if you're an outlaw." With considerable effort, she dragged him toward the cabin, his blood staining the front of her faded blue dress. Hours later, the stranger lay on her bed, stripped to his undergarments, his side bandaged where she'd removed the bullet. Fever gripped him, his delirious mutterings revealing fragments of a life. "Grant. Name's Grant. Cattle. Ramsay's herd ambushed." For 3 days, Josephine barely slept, constantly replacing cool cloths on his forehead, forcing broth between his parched lips, and changing blood-soaked bandages. On the 4th morning, she awoke slumped in her chair to find clear blue eyes studying her. "You saved my life," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Don't read too much into it," she replied, standing to check his wound. "I'd have done the same for a wounded coyote." A faint smile touched his lips. "Grant Ramsay, I'd offer to shake your hand, but I'm not sure I can lift my arm." "Josephine Valenti. Mrs. Valenti," she emphasized, though the ring no longer adorned her finger. "What happened to you, Mr. Ramsay?" "Rustlers. They took half our herd while we were moving them north to Cheyenne. I went after them." "Foolish." His face darkened. "They left me for dead. Most men would have died," she observed clinically, though something about his fortitude impressed her. "You're stubborn." "So I've been told." His eyes swept the small cabin. "Where's Mr. Valenti?" "Dead. 3 years now." "I'm sorry." She nodded curtly, her walls firmly in place. "Rest. When you're strong enough to ride, I'll expect you to move on. I don't need complications." Over the next 2 weeks, Grant's strength gradually returned. Despite her determination to keep him at arm's length, Josephine found herself drawn to his quiet manner and unexpected kindness. He insisted on helping where he could, whittling replacement handles for broken tools, teaching her a better way to mend harnesses, sharing stories of cattle drives that made evenings pass more quickly. "You know your way around a ranch," she observed one evening as they sat before the fire, his hands skillfully working leather into a new bridle. "My father's ranch in Texas. Been working cattle since I could walk." He looked up, catching her studying him. "What about you? This isn't an easy life for anyone, especially a woman alone." She stiffened. "I manage. I can see that. It's remarkable what you've built here. It was my husband's dream. I'm just preserving it." Grant set his work aside. "Is that enough? Just preserving something from the past?" The question hit too close to the truth she'd been avoiding. She stood abruptly. "It has to be. Dreams get people killed out here." A week later, Grant was strong enough to ride. Josephine returned from tending the cattle to find him saddling his horse. The foreman at Ramsay Ranch will be wondering if I'm dead by now, he explained, though his eyes betrayed reluctance. I can't impose on your hospitality any longer. You're well enough to travel, she agreed, ignoring the hollow feeling in her chest. That's good. He mounted with only a slight grimace, then reached into his saddlebag. I want you to have this. He extended a folded piece of paper. What is it? Deed to 20 head of cattle from our herd. Payment for saving my life. She stepped back. I don't want payment. It's not charity, Mrs. Valenti. It's a debt properly settled. His expression softened, though no amount of cattle could truly balance what I owe you. Before she could protest further, he tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Josephine staring after him with the deed clutched in her hand and an unexpected sense of loss weighing on her heart. Winter came harsh and unforgiving. Josephine endured as she always had, alone but for her memories. Yet now, alongside memories of Thomas were flashes of Grant, his hands crafting a new chair leg, his voice recounting tales of Texas cattle country, the warmth in his eyes when she'd made him laugh despite herself. Foolishness, she muttered, chopping wood with extra vigor one frigid morning. Men pass through. They don't stay. The frontier takes them eventually. February brought the worst blizzard in memory. For 3 days, Josephine huddled in her cabin, listening to the wind howl like banshees around the eaves. When it finally subsided, she emerged to find 3 of her cattle frozen in the field and the roof of her barn partially collapsed. As she surveyed the damage, tears of frustration stung her eyes. 3 years of stubborn self-sufficiency, and nature reminded her how precarious it all was. Without help, she wouldn't survive another winter here. Perhaps it was time to sell, to retreat to some town where widows could find respectable work as seamstresses or boarding house matrons. The sound of approaching horses broke her dark reverie. Josephine wiped her eyes and reached for her rifle, watching as 5 riders emerged from the tree line. Her breath caught as she recognized the lead rider. Grant Ramsay pulled his horse to a stop, looking more robust than when she'd last seen him, his shoulders broader under a heavy sheepskin coat. Behind him, 4 ranch hands waited respectfully. Mrs. Valenti, he called, dismounting. We heard about the storm. Came to check on you. You rode 3 days in this weather to check on me? Her voice betrayed her disbelief. I would have come sooner if the trails were passable. He gestured to the damaged barn. Looks like we arrived just in time. I don't need charity, Mr. Ramsay. Not offering any. But neighbors help neighbors out here. Otherwise, none of us survive. He nodded to his men, who began unloading tools and supplies. We'll have that barn fixed by sundown. She wanted to refuse, to prove she needed no one, but practicality won out. Your men can sleep in the barn tonight. I won't have you riding back in the dark. Grant's smile cracked through her defenses. Much obliged. True to his word, by sunset the barn stood sturdy again. The ranch hands retreated to give their boss privacy as he approached Josephine on the porch. Thank you, she said stiffly. I'd offer payment, but the only payment I want is to know you're safe. He hesitated. I've thought about you. Every day since I left. Mr. Ramsay, Grant. Please. Grant. The name felt intimate on her tongue. Whatever you're thinking, it's not possible. I chose this life of independence. Did you? Or did circumstances choose it for you? He stepped closer. Josephine, the frontier doesn't have to mean facing everything alone. That's how it breaks people. And loving someone only to lose them doesn't break you, she challenged, her voice barely above a whisper. It nearly did when my mother died. My father retreated into himself for years. Grant's eyes held hers. But eventually he realized that avoiding love to avoid pain meant avoiding life itself. Something cracked inside her, a hairline fracture in the walls she'd built. I should check on your men, she said, retreating into practicality. The next morning, Grant and his men prepared to leave. He handed her a letter. My ranch is 3 days' ride west. If you need anything at all, send word. She accepted it wordlessly, watching them ride away until they were specks on the horizon. Spring came early that year. The letter remained unopened in Josephine's drawer, though she often found herself touching it, wondering. New calves were born, and she thought of the 20 head Grant had deeded her, cattle she had never collected. In late April, a wagon appeared on her property, driven by a stranger who introduced himself as Everett, foreman of the Ramsay Ranch. "Mr. Ramsay sent me to deliver these," he explained, indicating 20 healthy cattle in a makeshift pen attached to the wagon. "Said you never claimed what was rightfully yours." "He's persistent," Josephine observed, unable to suppress a smile. "Stubborn as they come, ma'am. Also asked me to give you this." He handed her an envelope. That night, after settling the new cattle, Josephine finally opened both letters. The first contained only an invitation to visit Ramsay Ranch. The second, delivered that day, was more direct. "Josephine, the truth is simple. I haven't been the same since Providence led me bleeding to your door. I've seen how loss has shaped you into someone fierce and independent, qualities I admire beyond words. But I've also seen glimpses of the woman beneath the armor, compassionate, intelligent, and lonely in ways she won't admit. I'm not asking you to forget your past or surrender your independence. I'm asking for a chance to show you that together, we might build something stronger than either of us could alone. If you feel even a fraction of what I feel, ride west. If not, I'll trouble you no more. Yours if you'll have me." Grant. 2 weeks later, Josephine found herself riding toward Ramsay Ranch, her heart battling between hope and terror. The property, when it came into view, stole her breath, 3 times the size of her homestead, with sturdy buildings, lush pastures, and mountains rising in the distance. Grant emerged from the main house as she approached, his expression shifting from surprise to undisguised joy. "You came." "I'm not promising anything," she warned, dismounting. "I only came to see these 20 cattle I apparently own." His smile widened. "Of course, though they've multiplied. You now own 23. As he showed her around the property, introducing her to workers who clearly respected him, Josephine felt her defenses weakening. Here was a man who had built something substantial, who commanded loyalty not through fear, but through fairness. That evening, seated on his porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Grant finally asked the question that hung between them. "Why did you come, Josephine? Really?" She looked at her hands, calloused from years of work. "Because every morning I wake up and decide to be alone. And lately, that decision has become harder. I'm not Thomas," he said gently. "I can't replace what you lost. I know that." She met his eyes. "But you make me remember there might be more to life than just surviving it. There is. So much more." He reached for her hand, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Josephine stayed a week, then returned to her homestead with a promise to consider Grant's proposal, combine their ranches, build a future together, face the frontier as partners rather than solitary survivors. Back home, everything looked smaller, lonelier. She walked the property, touching fence posts Thomas had set, remembering his dreams. "What would you want from me?" she whispered to the wind. No answer came, but as she watched the sunset, she knew Thomas would never have wanted this half-life for her, existing but not living, surviving but not thriving. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. Within a month, she had made arrangements to lease her land to a young family eager for a fresh start, taking only personal belongings, her horses, and the memories that would always be part of her. Grant met her at the boundary of his property, their property now. "Are you certain?" he asked, helping her down from her wagon. "No," she admitted honestly. "But I'm certain I want to find out what's possible. With you." They were married that autumn beneath an arch of golden aspen leaves, Josephine in a dress of cornflower blue that matched Grant's eyes. The ceremony was small, just ranch hands, a few neighbors, and a traveling preacher, but filled with a warmth Josephine had thought forever lost to her. "I promise to respect your independence," Grant vowed, "even as I offer my strength alongside yours. To honor your past while building our future." "And I promise," Josephine replied, her voice steady, "to remember that courage isn't just about facing the wilderness alone, but about risking your heart when it's already known loss." Winter came again, but this time Josephine faced it from within a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the steady presence of a man who had once arrived bleeding at her door and now stood strong beside her. Together they expanded the ranch, combining her practical knowledge of survival with his vision for growth. By the following spring, when the first wildflowers pushed through the melting snow, Josephine stood on their porch, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where new life grew. Penny for your thoughts, Grant said, joining her with a cup of hot coffee. I was thinking about how certain I was that love was a luxury the frontier wouldn't allow. She accepted the cup, leaning against him. How determined I was to need no one. And now, she smiled, watching his ranch hands move cattle to fresh pasture, the operation they'd built together thriving under their joint care. Now I know the truth of it. Out here, love isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. As essential as water, as sustaining as bread. She turned to face him. The frontier doesn't defeat love, Grant. Love is how we defeat the frontier. He brushed a strand of chestnut hair from her face, his touch still sending warmth through her after all this time. You nursed a half-dead cowboy back to health, never knowing he'd return to make you his forever. And you found a widow determined never to love again, never knowing she'd eventually make you hers. She reached up to touch his face. This man who had taught her that a heart, like the frontier itself, could be both wild and home. It seems we saved each other. Around them, the Colorado wind still howled across the plains, carrying the promise of storms to come. But now, they would weather them together. Two souls who had discovered that the greatest act of courage on the frontier wasn't facing it alone, but daring to build something that would outlast them both.